This is the Evergreen Empire.
Green grow the forests and fair flow the streams. The gentle deer grazes, the wild blossom gleams. From ocean wave raging to mountain serene, all nature's proclaiming our land's evergreen.
Welcome to Columbia Conversations. I'm Feliks Banel, editor of Columbia Magazine for the Washington State Historical Society. On this episode, we hear rare audio from an oral history interview recorded more than 50 years ago. The narrator is George Youst, who traveled with his family from the Midwest to Centralia by covered wagon in 1903 and 1904.
So Dorothy and I was tipping that barrel back and forth, and there was a rattlesnake under it, and this rattlesnake came out and bit Dorothy twice on the leg.
Thank you to Lionel Youst for sharing this recording with us. Now, here's George Youst describing some of the highlights of the trip and the hardships he and his family faced nearly 120 years ago.
Dad was freighting here for this camp there, and that was in Death Valley, and they'd haul this hay in and pile it up in big piles there, and bale hay, and then they'd pile up this grain too for the horses, because everything was done with horses then, and they'd build a corral around it with around this feed pile with barbed wire and fence posts, but them burros would come in there in the night and bust through the fence and get in there, and they'd just take a front hoof and they hit one of them sacks and just bust it open and eat all the grain they wanted and leave. And these guys would get out there with shotguns and shoot at them damn burros, you know. And they'd run away, but they'd be back again the next night for more eats. But if the horses would get into there, well, they'd founder themselves and kill them.
Yeah. They ain't got enough brains.
They ain't got enough brains to only eat what they need, see?
Yeah.
But, oh yes, this burro that Dad had promised to get me, you know.
Yeah.
Well, he finally got me. He finally got me a burro. It was a pretty good size. And there was lots of better ones that would fit me better than this one he got. This was a pretty good size burro he got for me. And he put a halter on him and tied him on behind the wagon. And that burro, he wasn't just about to follow that wagon. No. So finally he just fought till he broke the rope. Just fought till he broke the rope, but he had the halter. And that was worth quite a bit, that halter.
Yeah.
So there was another fellow following us that had they had a saddle horse there, Charlie Doggett. And so he took after this burro.
Yeah.
And he had quite a run on his horse, but to get close enough to him, but he shot the burro and killed the burro, but he got the halter.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what he did? He cut the tongue out of the burro, and we had the tongue for supper that night.
Is that right?
Yeah, the burro's tongue we had for supper.
That's all you used out of it, I suppose.
Well,
Yeah.
well,
I'll be darned.
yes, sir. Yeah, that was something I forgot about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we had. Yeah, and this Doggett, he had an old bony team there, and Dad said they had lampers. I don't know what lampers are, but anyhow, them son of a guns would just about eat the wagon box up there. He'd tie them up to the wagon every night, and they'd just about eat the wagon box up. You'd hear them chewing on that wagon box if they can't close enough to it. So, yeah, you could hear them eating on that wood for all night. But Dad said they had the lampers. I don't know what that was.
I never heard of it.
Yeah. So, well, we went through Denver, Colorado, and as we going through, my mother pointed out that that's where they made money.
Yeah.
I guess that was the mint there, but I didn't know what she was talking about.
Yeah.
Making money, I couldn't understand that. I couldn't understand that. But anyhow, that was where I saw my first streetcar, and the horses were scared to death of that streetcar, and of course that scared me too, so I wasn't much for machinery for quite a while after that. And somewhere along the road there was a couple of guys came along in a in an old car. They told me afterwards it was probably an Oldsmobile, but it had the tank, round tank on the back of it, just a one-seat rig and no top, and a round tank on the back, and a two-cylinder outfit. So they said it must have been the way it putted. It made an awful lot of noise. But they'd come by us, you know, and they'd get, maybe sometimes they get clean out of sight. And then they'd get stuck, and we'd catch up with them, and we'd pull out around them and go on. And after a while, somebody'd come along and pull them out, I guess. And they'd get it going, and then they'd pass us again. But that was the first automobile I'd ever seen.
I wonder how far he was going. Was he going all the way to the coast?
Oh, he probably going to the coast, yeah. Now that was in 1904.
Yeah, there wasn't many cars going to the coast in those days.
Yeah. And but we finally got over to the Dalles, Oregon. And then we got on a boat there, stern wheeler, went down through the locks and down to Vancouver. And then we went on up to Centralia, and that's where we stopped at Centralia. And but the big surprise to me was when we got to Centralia, my grandparents was there, and here we left them in Oklahoma. And we'd only been 10 months on the road, and I couldn't figure how they could get by us.
Never passed you.
No, never passed us on the road. But they'd come out on the train.
Yeah, a lot easier, right?
Yeah. And so we camped out there behind Granddad's barn. And so in this covered wagon, my Dad had a couple of hooks on the side of the hoops that went over the canvas. And that's where he hung his 22. And so Grandma, she had a hen there with a bunch of chickens. And there was a couple of kids lived next door there, and they got to teasing me about that was their chicken. And so I insisted it wasn't theirs, but they insisted it was. So I just crawled up in the wagon and got the 22, and I pulled down on this one kid that was insisting the most that was their chicken. And he run around the barn, and I shot, and bullet went in the toilet there. But they understood that they didn't want to fool with a Oklahoman. Oh well, I had to go back to Oklahoma now because I had a sister that was 2.5 years older than I was. See, and when
Did you lose a pair of pants while we was back east? Dad's got an extra pair of pants in his closet, but I don't know who they belong to.
Well, they might be mine.
And I tried to find out, and I tried to
stop
find
that
out.
thing?
They look more like you.
Yeah. I had a sister that was 2.5 years older than I was, and everybody that come to the house, well, they just go wild over her. You know, she was pretty and had curly hair and everything. Pay no attention to me. Here I was 2.5 years younger than she was, you know, and I was kind of jealous. Of that deal, you know. Hell, nobody paid any attention to me, and I thought it was just because I was a boy and she was a girl, you know. So one time I kept thinking about it, a long time I kept thinking about it, you know. I was a little shaver, you know. Boys them days used to wear dresses till they was about 3 years old. And so they didn't wear no pants, and you just went out and sat down any place because we didn't even have a two-holer, see, just on the ground any place. That's where you went. See, so it was handy without any, just a dress and no pants. So I kept studying this thing, you know, and of course when you go out and anybody went out there to the toilet and sat down like that, you could see all they had. And so I knew how girls was built. See, boys, see. So I finally figured out that it must be the way she was built. That was the reason why everybody went after her, over her, and they didn't nobody pay any attention to me. So on Dad's wagon, he had what they called a spring seat that sat across like that, you see. And then it had an iron bar here to hang on to, and then when this strap came back, it was flat here. So and he also had a shoeing hammer for shoeing the horses. See, So one day, I decided I'm going to fix this deal. So I went out there and I laid my penis on this here iron, and I took the hammer, sewing hammer, and hit her a bat I was going to mash. I was going to have a mashed Peter, like like Dorothy had, see? But I was going to fix that up, but it didn't work.
Right.
Well, I come out there and the blood was running out. Well, what happened?
Oh,
I was ashamed to tell her, you know. There ain't many guys, you know, that tell that on themselves.
Yeah, what were you, about 3 or 4?
Huh? Well, I was less than that then because Dorothy was only 5 when she was when the snake bit her and killed her. So I couldn't have been over 2 and a half.
Oh, yeah.
But I can remember it.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you could remember anything, I guess you could remember.
But that was, I didn't know whether I ought to put that on tape or not. I thought there wasn't many guys experienced
No, I never heard anything like that.
Well, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Well, sometime after that, we was over to my grandmother's, and Granddad had a barrel that set at the corner of the house to catch the rainwater because the water there was, they call it gyp water, and it was hard water, and but the rainwater was so much better to wash clothes.
Oh, yeah.
So he had this there, but there was evidently no water in this barrel, and so Dorothy and I was tipping that barrel back and forth, and there was a rattlesnake under it, and this rattlesnake came out and bit Dorothy twice on the leg, and so they took her in the house, and that's another thing I'm ashamed of ever since, because they gave Dorothy a doll. Grandma had a doll there for her to play with, you know. Well, of course, I wanted the doll, too. Oh, yeah. But I remember Grandma told me, she says, well, you let Dorothy have it now because she won't need it very long because she won't be here. See? Oh, yeah. And, well, she died anyhow. Dorothy died. And they had the funeral over there, and I guess a little church they had over there. And I noticed everybody was crying, and I wondered if I was supposed to cry too. Yeah. You know, because everybody else was crying. I can remember that now. I was so damn little too. So you don't tell me that the fella can't remember.
Yeah, you're damn right.
Yeah.
You've been listening to an excerpt from an oral history interview with George Youst, recorded by his son Lionel Youst in 1967. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Columbia Conversations from the Washington State Historical Society. For more information or to subscribe to Columbia Magazine, please visit washingtonhistory.org. I'm Feliks Banel.